Today we're talking to Myra Finkelstein. She's an environmental toxicologist with the University of California, Santa Cruz. Environmental toxicology is the study of the effects of chemicals on human health and the environment. By applying the principles of biology and chemistry, toxicologists can study the behavior of man-made and natural chemicals. Myra's research focuses on human impacts to wildlife, and her research works to better understand the chain of causality between wildlife's physiological responses to contaminants and the population level impacts of those effects. Hello, Myra. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us what inspired you to get involved with environmental toxicology?
Yes, so it was before I went to graduate school. I spent a lot of time working with various nonprofit organizations, including a marine protection organization. And we spent a lot of time at sea on a boat. And so one day I was coming up from my shift in the engine room, and I came up on the deck to, look out over the ocean and breathe in the great salt air. And the ship was just passing over a huge band of trash. And it was just shocking to me to see this trash, just basically gigantic band that you could stretch from horizon to horizon. And it just hit me. And I thought, oh my gosh, what are we doing to the planet in terms of pollution? And at that point, I decided, yes, I did want to go back to graduate school, and I wanted to understand how pollution was affecting the planet.
That's amazing. I hear stories about those garbage patches, but you don't usually get to see one up close and personal. I can imagine how that would impact you. Can you tell us a story about someone in the field that inspired you or that you really admire?
Yeah, and I had thought about this, and I wanted to talk about Dan Forney, who worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I spent many, many years working with Dan to help clean up the lead-based paint on an old military base on Midway Atoll. And now Midway Atoll has the world's largest population of Laysan albatross, and they would nest right next to these old military buildings. But unfortunately, the chicks would eat the lead-based paint from the buildings and become lead poisoned and die. It was really tragic and really sad. So I was doing work out there to understand, what exactly was the source of the lead to the chicks, and it was the paint, and what was the population level impacts. And through that, I met Dan Forney, who was a very interesting person and not what you'd think about as far as a scientist. He was a Vietnam vet and he was a contaminant specialist, but he had such an amazing passion and love for the birds, as well as just really a great scientific mind. And so Dan and I worked together for many years to basically help find a solution for cleaning up the lead-based paint. And one thing that really inspired me about Dan was his just passion for just living and passion for animals. And he could always find hope and the good thing going forward, which I really loved. And also that he didn't care about politics. He just cared about science. And so that's what I wanted to talk about him. And he passed away about 5 years ago. And I still think about him, especially when I think about those albatross.
That's amazing. It's important to have people who bring hope into the picture. What was the most challenging part of becoming an environmental toxicologist, and how did you overcome that?
Well, I think the most challenging part is something that I'm still dealing with right now, is that you're constantly dealing with the kind of the bad effects of human impacts to the environment, and like pollution and how it's affecting individuals and how it's affecting populations and the consequences of that. So it can be pretty dreary and depressing day to spend your life, or your work day thinking about how lead is poisoning condors. And so I think that's a challenge that I deal with constantly, especially working in this field. And I overcome it by reading a lot of fun books. So I don't like those really serious movies. I like the funny, light comedies and movies and books. And also by understanding that, the victories that I have. So when we do generate science that makes a difference and helps save animals and make the world a better place, that kind of makes up for it.
That's wonderful. That's got to be a great sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, it makes it worthwhile.
So along those lines, how do you hope that your work can help California Condors or support the recovery program?
So I hope that my work can help in a couple of different ways. First, to help identify risks that can be mitigated. So for example, the majority of California condors are poisoned from ingesting spent lead ammunition that they find in carcasses. But occasionally something else happens. And so we found this very isolated incidents where California condors were lead poisoned because they were roosting on an old fire watch tower. And they were basically just like picking off the paint off that tower. And through our work, we were able to identify this source of lead poisoning to a very small number of condors, but we are able to identify it quickly, and immediately effort was done to fix that problem. And so that's really cool, when you can actually figure something out and then it can be fixed almost immediately afterwards. So that's what I hope for our work. And the other thing that we have our work being done, and it's not just me, because I work with a really talented team of other quantitative biologists and ecologists, is to generate science and information to help prioritize management actions, because there's lots of things that could be done on the table, but we don't have the money to do all of them. And so one big part of our work is to help managers decide which is the most effective thing to do, which can save the most birds.
Okay, well, that must be super, super useful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
On a slightly different note, what's your greatest non-work related skill or accomplishment?
So I think now it might be that I'm homeschooling my 10-year-old twin boys, but I don't know if I'd really call that an accomplishment, because I don't know, we get through the end of the day, but I'm not sure what they're going to learn at the end of this year. But I think it's got to be, so in my 20s, I spent working with a conservation group trying to protect wolves in British Columbia. And we were able to stop the illegal shooting of wolves from helicopters. And I think that was, looking back, I'm very proud of that accomplishment, because it ended up saving a lot of wolves from being shot from helicopters illegally. So that makes me feel good.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
Thank you for being here and participating in this interview. And it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to share my stories with you.
Excellent. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.